Hello, everyone. I am Claudiumurgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Masami Covey. Masami was born and raised in Japan in a bicultural family, and she draws extensively from her blend of East meet West cultural, linguistic, and energy healing experience. Masami is an experienced health intuitive, somatic practitioner, functional nutritional therapy practitioner, yoga therapist, positive neuroplasticity practitioner, applied linguist, and faculty member at the Shift Network. Masami provides highly personalized health support for all ages, applying the foundations of nutritional science, hair tissue mineral analysis, yoga therapy, breathwork, and Ayurveda. She and her husband, Chris, developed Zenshin Method, a whole person approach that empowers individuals to become experts of themselves and shine as who they are. Masami, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
In fact, you are my third guest of Japanese descent. And again, most of them, the other two were half and half. And it's interesting to have this discussion about culture and spirituality, especially about Japan, which is so embedded into spirituality and traditions and spirit of the land. So I'm quite interested to find out if how the Japanese traditions influence your upbringing.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to your background today. It makes me want to go home. That's the Mount Fuji, and it's a really scenic view of the Mount Fuji with the sakura and cherry blossoms in the background. So I appreciate you doing that touch. Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Japan. So, it makes it a little bit, I suppose, different than maybe if have your parents grow up in maybe say United States that are from Japan and you're the second generation. But I was born and raised, lived in this small little, I wouldn't say it's small because Japan is very populated, but considered to places like Tokyo and Osaka and other major cities where I grew up, it's a very small place. And I only spoke Japanese, bicultural, but not bilingual. And that was by my parents' decision not to teach us two languages. So I was basically thinking that was Japanese, and I worked as if I'm Japanese all my life. It's been a journey to find who I am, straddling different cultures, different languages, and finding who I am. But culturally, that's where I grew up, spoke only Japanese, went to a Japanese school, not an international school or a military school, because my father was not a military base, but my father was a linguist. So he was a college professor. So I grew up in a small town with the college campus surrounding us. So I suppose you could say that in my core of who I am, especially my first chakra and where I connect to in terms of the rootedness of who I am Japanese at heart. And several of my past lives too have been Japanese male figures, but I have been Japanese for many, many times.
So were you a samurai in a previous life?
I was actually an interesting training guy for ninjas. I don't know, the word ninja, but ninjas are a little different than samurais. They are highly skilled, acrobatic kind of warriors that they can go from one roof to the next. And, they go into in the night, and they're samurais maybe during the day, but they're highly skilled in kind of hidden, I would say, what do you call those? Like special agents kind of a thing. And so I was an older man who trained these ninjas, and I was a ninja master myself in one of my past lives. So,
and in fact, if you remember the movie The Last Samurai, we had both of them, the samurais being attacked by ninjas trying to kill their leader. So when the Japanese government hired the Americans to come and help them get rid of samurai and modernize Japan, so that was an instance when both clashed with each other.
That's right. And then the last samurai was actually based on my hometown. It's that castle that they fought. That was the last front of Japan, that they were holding on to their ways, their traditional ways. I wouldn't call it the old ways. It's just that's how they lived for centuries, you know. And so that was the last stronghold. That's why I'm from the most southern island. It was the most, I would say, traditionally rooted, and maybe conservative isn't the word, but it was very much traditional way of living based. So growing up in Japan, where my father was literally, and I'm not making this up, but literally a single white male figure in the population of about 1 million people, and he was 6'4", so almost 200 meters. And, just sticks out, blonde, blue eyes, as blonde as he comes, right? And so there was just so much to learn, but so much to navigate through the sea of basically bowl cuts, straight black hair. And here's my father, and my two other siblings and I were the only mixed children. And I had strawberry blonde curly hair. So we were the nails that could never be hammered down, because there's a saying in Japanese, if the nail sticks out, hammer them down. And I was one of those kids that I was never going to get hammered down, but I worked really hard to belong, because that is the first basic human needs. You can even look at psychology of Maslow's pyramid. The basic foundation of human beings is to have the basic needs being met, of being belonging, being accepted. You have the tribe that you can connect with. And so I feel like I did that my entire life living there up to a certain point. And I was basically told to move to the United States on my own, to live with different foster care homes. So that was not quite 16 years old. So up to the point, my goal in life was to be accepted, belonging, and to do the best I can, so I didn't get picked on or bullied. And I mean, there were so many beautiful things about Japan, but to be fully honest with you, being half this and half that, we're always called the half. And I really did not like that terms, because I'm thinking, well, what am I half of? Like, I'm a full person. I'm a whole being. So I started calling myself the double instead of half, just to kind of throw people off. But anyways, I think in order to survive, I was recently asked about resiliency, about my life, and how did I come to be who I am? And first of all, I had to really tweak the resiliency here and there, because my initial way of wanting to belong was to fight my way in to belonging, or be the best in everything, from language classes to music to running the fastest, so doing the best, and almost like really speaking up for my rights and things like that. But then I think my resiliency has softened up, being able to just sit back a little bit and allow this kind of ebb and flow, so I don't see the world as a war zone anymore, which has been really healing. And I think that really helped me to heal and transition from the MS diagnosis as well, not to fight that diagnosis like what I used to do, like up against with things. And before I pause, I'll just share one story about what I mean by fighting. Is that like I said, I grew up in a college campus, so it was kind of walls around it, lots of trees, different college buildings. And so we had the whole maybe 150 acres of just running around with our bicycles. But as soon as we left that college campus and we were on the normal, like a regular streets, on the public streets, we were pointed fingers and called names. And there was a lot of bigotry and a lot of racism that I experienced from the moment I stepped out of the gate and until we came back in. But with that, one day I was in first grade. I came home from school, crying again, as somewhat usual. My father towered over me, like I said, he was 6'4". He just stood there patiently. And he wasn't home that often. He was usually working, but he was just standing there. And he looked at me, he said, Masami, you have two choices. One, you can go back out there, open that gate and go out there and show them who you are and fight them, or you can become a doormat and get stepped all over. I mean, now come to think of it, I think there are more choices than two, is what I've realized. There's a beautiful middle way that I have found. But I turned around, literally. I mean, it wasn't a choice, right? My father was asking me to go back out there and fight for my rights. So I did go out there and started really, literally punching the kids and pushing the kids that would call me names. And it became my motto in a way. It's like, fight, be resistant, feisty. But that, I don't think that was my innate nature, So I'm finally kind of finding my way. And I did the same. I was able to find the middle way when I got diagnosed with MS.
Yeah. And I know that this is not a consolation at this point, but this is a recurring story from other guests I had on this podcast, that when they moved from their country of origin to a new country and their skin color was different, they were made fun of. Fingers were pointed at them. They were called names, and that was a bit traumatic for them, and they carried that trauma throughout their lives up to a point when they understood how to eliminate it. But again, this is what happens, I think, all over the world when we are born in a different culture than our parents' culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it continued on when I moved to the US. And, so it just, I felt like I never could quite find my footings.
Yes.
And one, that's because I was still looking for the outside to have open arms to take me in, when in fact, it was me that I really needed to come home and finding the belonging within myself. Then I could really exist anywhere in the world. But, when I moved to the US, I moved to the northern part of Minnesota, and where there was just a lot of, I would say they were miners that they mine iron and ore, and they were shipping these raw materials to make car parts in Detroit. So through Lake Superior, they will ship these raw materials. And it was in late 80s where a lot of the Japanese imported cars were coming in. So there was a lot of anti-Asian acts, and a lot of people were expressing that outwardly. And so here I come again, and here I am trying to, on one hand, I wanted to be Japanese and I never could fully. And then I come here and then all of a sudden I am Japanese somehow. And I can't be the other half that I am, other wholeness that I am. So, as long as we're trying to look for the acceptance outside of who we are, I think we'll constantly bump into something or other. And then I think I had a huge awakening around age 18 and 19 when I started college, when I was searching. I was in this major seeking mode to find who I am, like, where do I belong? So I did a lot of legal studies, trying to figure out why I was sent to the US. And this is a part of the story that a lot of people don't know, and I have not really shared with the public, but the United States had, up to early 1980s, they had this law that they required children that were born outside of the United States and had fathers that were an American or Americans, they had to come to the United States before they turned 18 for 2 consecutive years in order to keep your US citizenship. Mm-hmm. So there's a legal background to me being sent to this country on my own. And I didn't speak a word of English. So that makes it even harder. But with all that, I was having existential crisis at that point, my first round of it, major round of it at 18 and 19. And I came across this singer, an African-American singer, and she started the Sweet Honey in the Rock. It's just a women's vocal group. And I was researching about her, and I read about her, some of the articles that she's written, and she called it the third place. She said, I belong in the third place, and I straddle between two worlds. And I thought, that's it. That's what I need to do. I need to straddle between two worlds and find my belonging in that, whether you want to call it the third place or within yourself. And I think, ignited that sense of straddling in multiple places. And I have brought that into my work as well as health intuitive, and to work with people's health is not to only go into the science of it and the physiology and the biology, but there's a spiritual part. There's even prenatal issues. There's the traumas. There's ancestral traumas. There are your past lives traumas and past lives things that you haven't sorted out, or even your, like I said, ancestors, but just even your immediate grandmothers, maybe great grandmothers' traumas that we all carry in our bodies and in our cells. So I always straddle between these two worlds, left and right, right brain, left brain, science and spirituality. So I'm sure I was prepping myself to do what I do now from birth and pre-birth. So
yeah, and assuming that you keep in contact with your Japanese family connections and you go there often, how do you find Japan these days in terms of spirituality and preserving their ancient traditions? Is that better? It's fading out? How do you see it?
Well, I think, let me say it this way. It's been several years since I've been back. And for one reason, my mother's there, my brother's there, my cousins and, extended families are there. But our family and in our hometown actually experienced two major earthquakes in 2016. And it was 7.3, basically, the earthquake that's pretty strong, that can break down buildings and things. So it broke down it basically collapsed our home, our family home, and our father died because of the earthquakes as well. And it was very traumatizing, and it was so exhausting to our body, mind, spirit as a collective, as a family. And it created major rifts within ourselves as well. It's something that you would think it would bring us together, and it did for a time being, and then imploded, and so after that, I just really been taking time away from Japan. I can't seem to make myself go back, and I've been thinking about, it's time for me to return, but maybe this time not to just go home to where I grew up, but maybe finding new ways to explore Japan in a different way. But that being said, what I have noticed through Japanese websites and things that I'm connected to and the things I read that is in Japanese, and since 2016, I haven't been back. But let's say what I'm starting to see is that there's a core group of people that are really starting to rebirth or maybe revisit and starting to dig up some of these ancient traditions and ancient teachings. And it's been amazing to watch how much is actually coming up. And is it a mainstream? Yes, if you look for it. But I think we're being called to look for it now. So it used to be, you just open your own doors and windows, and maybe you were exposed to the different shrine festivals and, different rituals, and everything was based on that. And I'm glad that I grew up in that era still. My grandparents were from the 1800s, 1890s. So I was able to really learn a lot from them. And my parents, my mother is in her 80s now, mid to late 80s now. So she grew up with a lot of kind of traditions, right? So I was able to learn that. But nowadays, I think when your heart is being called, you can really find these core group of people that are starting to teach us the Shintoism, which is not really an ism. It's not a religion. It's all based on nature. It's all based on seeing all things as God, seeing you as God, I'm God, and different parts of the world. So like, let's say even a giant rock can become a God. A giant tree can, even a butterfly can, and even the ancestors actually can become gods, and they can have their own shrines. And so that's coming back. And in the traditional ritual that's based on seasonality, because Japan is very important. We see 4 seasons to be probably the most important key to connecting with Mother Gaia, connecting with our own inner elements, and with our own seasonalities of who we are. So we go through different seasons in our lives, right? We start with the spring of the birth and the birthing and the growth. And then the summer is this enrichment of the green. And we even call, we call youngsters, oh, he or she are green, right? We have the same kind of language in Japanese too. It's the greening of who we are. And then we go into the season of harvesting, and maybe harvesting more pauses and harvesting what you've planted. And then you go into the winter of starting to think about, okay, what is it to transition into another realm? So I think those are starting to be taught, but in kind of an underground, but very powerful forces are starting to come through. So it's not lost at all. For a while, I thought, oh my gosh, the Japan that I grew up in is no longer there. And I felt really saddened by it. Really, it was a grief that I went through, that I felt like I lost my home at one point, particularly in the mid 90s into early 2000s. But I'm very hopeful now that that's coming back.
Yes, and Japan has amazing craftsmanship in like ceramic and book bindings and materials, and they are just amazing. I learned about that over the last 6-7 years, reading certain magazines, and the quality is amazing. And I am in contact with someone from Tokyo, scientists from Tokyo who work with water. And Dr. Masaru Emoto, which I'm pretty sure you are aware of, was part of my research when I wrote my books about water. And right now we are working with the Hado technique, which he developed. And again, it's amazing culture and traditions. So thank you for sharing all this with us.
Yes. Yeah. And then thank you for sharing about the water. He actually studied some of this in my hometown as well, because like I said, I'm from the rural area, and they have one of the cleanest waters in the world. So he has influenced us tremendously. And also now the water idea is expanding to the 4th stage of water, which is so exciting. And somebody that studied, I have been just in love with the idea of fascia. I don't know if you're familiar with the fascia, but fascia is like a web that connects your entire being. And I'm really having a lot of intuitive downloads and an intuitive inner wisdom that is saying you must revisit the fascial world, because I was really guided to that about, I would say 15 years ago. I was guided to working with fascia, and fascia is what holds that 4th stage of water. And that's where our memories are stored, our historical memories, historical patterns, our before they become crystallized stories. And I call it the crystallized stories become bones. But before they become crystallized into the bones and bone marrow, they actually go through this water, which is communicating through the fascial layers. That's communicating through the web of who you are. So when you tug at something, even just pinching your shoulders, that's communicating down to generally maybe even the opposite hips. And that's going to bring out different emotions from what happened to you, even in the birthing process, to maybe the injuries that you experienced when you're 3 years old, maybe falling off of something. You were on the swing and you fell off and you fell on your other hip or something. Just many, many things are speaking to us through the water channels that our fascia is there to transport them through. So yeah, I've been very, very fascinated by the 4th stage, the water work, and the fascia within our system. So
Yes, and I love these interviews because I learn so much from every single one of my guests, and these ideas we can touch on later on out of the outside of this interview, because I might use them on my third book, which is part of the trilogy about water. So thank you very much for that. In one of your blogs, you mentioned that while in kindergarten, you're pretty much forced, or the kids were forced to stay barefoot. I think that's an amazing idea to have children connected and being grounded. I think you have found memories of this process they kind of imposed onto you and the other children.
Yes, it was actually all the way up till I was 12 years old. So all the way to the end of 6th grade, we were not allowed to wear shoes once you arrived at the school. So it didn't matter raining or snowing or whatever's happening outside, we were barefoot. And it was one of those things that it wasn't just that. And I'll explain another funny thing, because so you have to remember my father was from Iowa, northern Iowa, and he thought it was the craziest thing that we have to do, which I didn't mind it, but my father thought, how uncivilized, right, to take your shoes off. And you know, I'm sure he actually even complained to the school, well, what is going on? The children's gonna, you know, catch cold or something like that. But the fact is you don't catch cold because you're always so grounded to Mother Earth. And I've learned to walk on just about any surfaces, from gravel to sandy things to maybe, you know, grass to pokey things, to things that could maybe feel like, oh, these things could hurt you. No, your feet really adapt to this. And I started to see my feet as almost like second hands. So they can do gripping, they can twist things, they can open doorknobs. And I didn't think too much of it till one time my husband's just looked at me. He goes, do you realize that you just did that with your feet and or your foot? And I thought, oh, that's right. I didn't even think about it, that I have feet that are like hands, thanks to this many years of working with my feet. But there's one more other funny things about my father. So during the winter months in elementary schools, in Japanese elementary schools, all kids really, my school anyway, and then there's all across Japan, you will see this on TV and things like that. We'll all take our shirts off when we're kids and then down to our underwear, and we go outside with our dry washcloth. So everybody had to bring a dry washcloth, and we'll do a lymph massage. And it's literally called the winter massage. And then you just massage your skin towards your heart. And many of you viewers probably know that the lymphatic system you want to massage towards your heart. And that's very important. So you do it all over your body. So there'll be hundreds of kids out in the playground with bare feet and practically naked doing these things. And my father was, what about the coats? I think he actually this time too contacted the school and said, what about putting kids, put the coats on? And the school's like, no, you don't understand. We have to get the strength from inside out. So I was always kind of caught in the middle between the school and my dad, or either my mom, who wanted to do acupuncture points for my fever, or she would use this thing called terumi, which is using incense and using the smoke that comes from the incense to the skin issues or any lesions or even like warts and things like that. She would be using those, and you blow on the skin surfaces. And I would respond so beautifully to that. But my father thought it was the craziest thing we were doing. And he would be like, here's your, aspirin, here's your Tylenol. And you are, I'm taking you to a dermatologist to have that wart looked at, So, but what I've learned over the years is that when you're that little, many things really work well for you, because even warts and things like that, if you could convince, you don't even have to convince 3-year-old or 5-year-old and say, if you pray over your warts, or if you just talk to your skin issues, place your own hands on it and speak to them, they literally begin to heal. And so I learned on one hand that I can do this on my own. And if I need the medical interventions through going to the dermatologist or something like that, I can do that as well. And I'll just give you a one kind of an interesting example. So I had this, something must have bit my leg or something. I have no idea. But it started to bubble up and it got infected, and it became kind of a large thing. And my mom was working on ointments and herbs and the smoke of from the incense and things like that. And my dad took one look at me and he said, "Get on the back of the motorcycle. We're going to the dermatologist." And that was exactly what I needed to do at that point, because I had been basically harboring this infections. It was localized, but it was not getting any better. So there are times that we really need to balance these things, right? I mean, always. Yeah.
Yes, and I agree. And I will love to have a lot of doctors listening to the first part of your story as well, to understand that our immune system, especially when we are young, does wonders for us, and we don't need 120 or whatever number of vaccines our kids get these days before age 5 or whatever, and we are just inundated with the news and the regulations about what should we do to our immune system. In fact, our health. They don't even discuss about the immune system, and they don't want to credit our immune system for how powerful it is and what can it done for our health. And that's very sad.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And I think this is where, if we can step back, all of us, because I think all of us have that third place that I spoke about, where you get to actually see the worlds that you have occupied, because many of us play different roles, right? We have many archetypes that are coming in. I always say to my clients, whenever you show up, just remember that you have about maybe 12, 13, 14 other archetypes are showing up. So you're never alone. You're always having a dinner party every time you sit down to have your dinner, because there'll be other archetypes that have things to say about it. And for me, it's constantly looking at different ways that I have picked up information, different ways I've navigated different situations, different tough situations and beautiful situations, and to always come back and center yourself. And I don't just center into my heart, but the centering into Hara. Hara is Hara, Hara. Hara is a beautiful center that sits, in Chinese it would be Dantian, in Japanese is Tanden, but which is the lower part of your chakras. So it's generally around second chakra, between second and first chakra area. That's the Hara center. So I ask people to always place one hand at the heart, but the other hand towards the lower belly, maybe an inch or two below your belly button area, and really connect with these two centers. And pause and make sure that your head isn't getting in the way so much of analyzing it. And when I work with my clients and have them do muscle testing, I call it the basically 4H system, but it's the head, heart, and Hara, and hands. And I always have them say, okay, is this your head that is speaking based on your knowledge, based on what you've Googled, based on what you've heard on different summits? I'm on a lot of summits as well, but we were picking up so much information, but we're not digesting that information in the Hara first. So digest it down first, then let that filter through the heart, and your heart becomes kind of a referee. Where the hands come in is that placement of your hands, or let's say I'm drinking a warm water right here, but is it, you can ask yourself, is this good for me? By touching the cup, and sometimes just even sticking your finger and tasting what you're testing. And so that's why I call it the 4H system. But having all cohesiveness coming back, and let the heart speak sometimes last, because your heart is going to be the referee between all these different centers. So I don't know where I was going with it, but I think it's the balancing of the East meets West, the left brain, right brain, science and spirituality, but also within your system, there are divisions that can get created based on what you've picked up from the information and based on some of the feelings and sensations and intuitions that you're feeling in your inner wisdom, and then bring them together. And we need to really pause, before we head on with our decisions. It's helpful to just pause and just say, I'm just going to sit with this and stand in this, the third place, I would call it for myself, third place for a moment. So I feel very grounded on my both feet. Then make my next step.
Yes, and staying on the health discussion, in 2010 you were diagnosed with MS, and due to heavy work schedule and lack of proper diet. At that time you're teaching yoga. How did you feel to get that diagnosis while you're in the practice of helping others get healthy?
Yeah, right. I think a lot of us go through our own healing crisis, right? Energy crisis, our spiritual crisis, and all sorts, in order to find your way back home. Because I believe that all of us are on the right journey. All of us, I get clients that ask me, am I on the right path? And the answer is always yes. Yes, you are. Sometimes we take a little detour, and sometimes we need diagnosis as heavy as MS in order to bring you back from that detour or the U-turn that you took, and then come back to the path that you are meant to walk on. And I was at that time no longer teaching yoga as classes, but I'm a yoga therapist. So yoga therapy is a little bit different than the classroom yoga classes, where you have many people doing poses and things and asanas and pranayama and meditation practices. But it was basically one-on-one sessions. So yoga therapy is based on your symptoms, maybe even your diagnosis, or maybe your physical ailments that the therapists know a lot about, and they guide you through your breathing techniques that it's personalized. Movements are personalized. So sometimes yoga therapists may only give you 5 poses to work on. So it's not sun salutations, it's not going to the Bikram class or anything like that. Not that those are not great. It's just for the individuals that I had been working on. They were mostly wheelchair bound people through accidents or even through birth. I've worked with a lot of cancer patients at that point, especially breast cancer women that have gone through their surgeries and their tissues have frozen, or the myofascia, that the scar tissues have become actually so hardened that I needed to manually release them through movements and breath and my hands. And so I was doing a lot of hands-on healing work through, whether you want to call it energy medicine or not, it's very much something that came through me. And I have studied a lot, but it's also was always filtered through me. And so I was very comfortable working with people with hands-on. So I was working a lot. I was literally, my first client would start at 6 a.m., not ending till 9 p.m. And here I am in the name of health and healing and supporting them. I wasn't even taking time for my lunch. I wasn't taking a break to even go to the bathroom sometimes, because next client was coming, or not enough fluids, water. And so when I broke down, it wasn't a total surprise to me, to be honest with you. The doctor that told me is a good friend of ours, and he was looking at the scans and he was looking at the radiologist, results, and he had tears coming down. And I had to actually go up to him and say, everything's going to be okay. So it was a very different situation. But why that would be generally a shocking kind of a diagnosis for somebody. I was in my late 30s, right? And I couldn't walk anymore. I was on crutches. I was having so much physical pain that was so unbearable. But what happened to me was a couple things. So one was about a year before my diagnosis and a year before my breakdown, I was working with an MS client, because I had several MS clients as well. And the MS is a very personalized expression. So this particular client was pretty much bed rested at this point. And so I would go to her house and I would do some gentle stretches with her, and we'll do meditation and breathing and we'll sit and talk a lot. But one day I was stretching her and getting her hamstrings to loosen up a little bit because she was pretty much wheelchair bound at this point. And something inside me, there was a voice, and it was a masculine voice actually, that said, "This is your future you. This is your future you." And I thought, I didn't freak out, but because I stayed very professional with her, I didn't express this to her. But I remember feeling like, what was that? So that was one. But I didn't wake up then. Okay. I'm a very stubborn human being. And like I said, my resiliency was based on feistiness and fighting the world, right? So I was good at pushing out, like, don't get to me, don't talk to me, like, don't hurt me. So I was very much of a defensive kind of a, put defense shields around me. So I thought, no, I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm not going to let that impact me. So I went my own way. And then it was literally 2 days before I lost the ability to walk. I had been working so much nonstop to support my marriage, and then we're building the house, and just the financially, I had to really be working a lot. But I was pushing myself. I knew that, and so I told my husband. I said, I need to take a break, and I need to go into a silence, and I need to do a contemplative practice. So I actually contacted in Colorado, up in the mountains. There was this place the Carmelite nuns would run. And it's a little home, or like a place you could rent. And it was about 300 square feet. Just a little kitchen and a bedroom, and nothing, nothing major. It's just a bathroom and where you can rent. Total silence. And they want you to be in silence because this is a contemplative, this is a place to be in your own silence. By the way, it's not silent inside. When the outside shuts down, there's so much noise that is coming from the inside out. It was unbearable. So that I arrived there, and then I had been enjoying my silence, and I was contending with my noise at the same time. I had so much hip pain by then. So my old pattern was to move through it, be feisty with it, work through it. So guess what I do? I decided to go for a hike. So I go on this major hike to visit this little hut that they call it the St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross is the one that wrote that poetry book that referenced back to the dark night of the soul, right? We say that often, the dark night of the soul. But he's the one that was tormented and tortured for 9 straight months for his belief system. And then that's when he wrote that in his dungeon, because he was so exposed to the divine light. He was writing the dark night of the soul in the presence of the divine light. So I decided to go for this hike to visit the St. John of the Cross, his hut. I'm sitting out there in this gorgeous open fields of the Rocky Mountains, and the just like miles and miles and hundreds of miles of open space. And something said to me, go walking. Let's go walking. So I did. I just went for a little walk, not thinking I was going to go on a major hike or anything. And I saw a dead elk right by my right side. And I thought, wow, that must have just died, because nothing had found it yet. It was just flies. Flies were starting to find it. And so I thought, wow, that's incredible. So I kept walking. And then I thought, the storm is moving through. I don't need to push my hips anymore. I've already done a huge amount of hike. So I'm walking back literally 10 minutes after I passed this elk. I come back my way, the same exact way. And the elk is gone. The entire giant beast is gone. And I'm looking, there's no imprint of it, not even a sign that the elk was dead there. And so I make my way back to the St. John of the Cross thinking, this is just crazy. And I finally come down to my hermitage. They call it the Hermitage. And I find my way there, and I'm still a little perplexed by this whole experience. And that night was the new moon. No moon in sight. So dark, and the stars were so bright. They were literally talking to me. The shimmers were talking to me. And I go out there, look at the Milky Way. I look up and I hear this voice, and it says, "Are you ready to experience true you?" And I thought, who said that? So I'm looking around the space with nobody around, okay, for miles. And I don't know what to say. So I'm just kind of looking at the stars again, thinking, I don't know what that was. The voice clearly says again, "Are you ready to experience true you?" And I look up, look around, and I'm just about practically shaking at this point. I shake my head like this and I run back to my hermitage, lock the door. There's nobody. I mean, you don't even need to lock or pull the curtains. And I pulled all my curtains, locked the door. I sat there for 2 straight hours. I did not move. And I just shook my head and I said, hell no. Hell no. I don't want to experience true me. And the fact is, my name means truth. Masami means truth.
Wow.
And it was a breaking moment in my life. And 2 days later, I couldn't walk anymore. So by the time I got the diagnosis, which was 5 months later after that experience, that was not strange to me. I just knew at that moment, my husband and I went for a walk and we both looked at each other and said, we know exactly what to do. We need to start changing the way we live, the way we express ourselves. And we can do this. The healing power is in us. And in terms of the medical world, particularly with MS, like I said, it's very personalized. And I call it the MS as a mystery symptoms, is what I call it, because it's very mysterious to each and every individual that I've worked with too. So I've decided that I was going to go into the mystery. I was going to go into the more than a mystery, but the mystery of the universe at that point. And I was going to start from the ground up, which meant that cleaning out my diet even more than I had been doing, start taking care of my physiology, start taking care of the basic needs that I spoke about early on. It's your sleep, it's your water intake. It's about really taking care of who I am as this vehicle that I am. My soul has been housed. Because I've done a lot of emotional work. I worked with energies. I've worked with lights. I've worked with vibrations, sounds. I know so much about that side of the fields, but I had ignored the side of my body, physiology, the digestion, the nutrients, supplements, basic human needs to support, like I said, the soul that lives within us. And that's what changed the course of my life. And I am experiencing true me now. Even though I said no, the universe could care less. I mean, it was a rhetorical question, right? It was not a question. I was already on my way to finding my truth.
Yeah, the universe was testing you to see if you really want to face who you really are. And that resistance, I think, brought the MS onto you much sooner and brutal. So you can have that wake up call, as you said.
Yes, it is brutal. And also autoimmune conditions are one of those things that you really need to look at: deep-seated, unresolved anger and undigested resentment. And underneath all that work I've done and all the hundreds and thousands of people by then too that I have touched and worked on hands-on, I didn't realize how much I actually picked up, even though I thought I was releasing that every day. Because one of my clients, who's a Native American of Lakotas, he said to me, I've always considered you as shaman. And I said, I don't know. I don't really go by the labels, because I don't let labels define who I am. That's why I don't even call myself a healer or anything like that, because all my life I was labeled as you're half this, you're derogatory names for being, half Japanese, or gaijin, which is just a foreign being, like an alien. So I don't like to call myself anything, because we are all healers and we're all shamans in ourselves. But what he said to me is that when someone like you witnesses like a dead elk, And then when you don't encounter that dead elk and the elk has disappeared into the thin air, that means what you experienced is that because elk is used a lot in the Native American traditions as messengers as well, the messengers of you better change the course of your life. You know, this is you're a powerful being. Here's how powerful you are. Look at this amazing, amazing animal. But when you witness the dead elk, that means the greatness in you is going into death process, and you have to change the course that you're on. And so that was a huge wake-up call. But someone like me is stubborn. And I think, you know, we all, sometimes some people can change courses just by one weekend and say, oh, I think I'm going to just start doing differently. But for me, it took another full year to really go into the next realm of nutrition and Ayurveda. I studied Ayurveda as well, and then go a lot further with this is exactly a year later. It was actually July. You know, we're having this interview in July, but it was the beginning of July. So it was just about a year after my diagnosis of MS. What happened was I got hit by an armored truck on the way to work, and my car was destroyed. My neck curvature reversed and natural curvature just went forward. And I'm less than 5'2", and you know, I'm about 100 pounds. So this little person was just thrown off in the car and really made my body hurt all the time. I was in so much pain. So it took that and a couple more incidences for me to really say, okay, I will start incorporating my intuition. I will bring back the fact that I was always intuitive and I've ignored that side of me. And I will learn more about the physiology and the biology as well, you know.
Yes, and just to mention, you mentioned your size. I want to mention also that great essences are kept in small vials, you know, because it applies to me as well. So that's why.
I agree. And I say to people, well, you know, I'm small, but I have about 6'2" attitudes. So,
Masami, thank you for sharing that story. And I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the Zenshin Institute you created with Chris.
Yes. So it's based on this word Zenching. And Zenching is obviously a Japanese word. But this was, oh my gosh, this has been, I remember exactly, it was 2007. My husband and I just needed to kind of connect. So we decided to go to this quiet meditation room one evening. And we decided to just sit for a while. And the reason why we were sitting there was there was another reason. I remember my husband said, you know, you have these clients that come from far places. It's all word of mouth. And, you know, why do they find you and why do they come to you? And he said, there's got to be a method to this. And I said to him, I said, I just really pull back from like restrictive methods, or I don't do well with step 1, step 2, step 3. Part of it is the rebellious nature in me. But when you grow up in a society like Japan, where your skirt length has to be certain ways, they will come and literally measure from your kneecaps how many inches where the skirt should land, or your hair color should be black and straightened. And, you know, like I said, I had curly strawberry blonde hair. There's nothing I can do. In southern tropical island, my hair was like this big. You know, there's nothing I could do. There were so many rules that I just couldn't follow. So when my husband asked me about, is there a method to it? I've been really resisting that question for quite some time at that point. But he said, what if we sat with it? What if we sat and like really like dove deeply into it, sit deeply into that question? What would come up? And what happened was we're sitting across from each other. And it was almost simultaneous when this happened, both Chris and me. I said, oh my gosh, it's the word Zenching. And I said, let me pull up the Japanese English dictionary out for you. And then I pulled it up and I showed it to him and I said, there's 7 meanings to the word Zenching. And first word means the whole body. The next one is the heart and mind, because we don't separate, in Japanese language, we don't separate the mind from the heart. So there are always cohesions going on. So the whole heart, mind. And then there's this concept of like moving forward in a steady fashion. And then the fourth meaning is to leap. And so there's 7 meanings to this. Okay. So what happened was, like, it's like the English language, you know, you can spell C as S-E-E or S-E-A, right? But it sounds the same. It's the same concept. So when we started to break them down into the 7, we thought, you know, like so I got to 4, and then the 5 is like a goodness of being you. So there's a goodness that comes from within, the self-goodness, like a self-knowing. And then the 6th one is basically, there's the goodness of a wholeness of everyone, the universal goodness, and then, or universal divine is the 6th one. And then the 7th one is this idea about beginning and the future, because in Japanese language, we don't distinguish between the past and the future in the word itself. The word past is mae, but mae can also mean the future. So it's this, you embody this moment holding the past and the future. So the future self and the past lives all come together. So that's the 7th meaning. So when we went through all of them, we thought, wow, this is powerful and so deep. So we're still in the process of getting to know what is it. We've attempted to try to write books about this, but the fact it is so deep that I think we're just practicing it, living it right now. We are going through these 7 steps right now. And I just believe that when the Zenshin gods give me the green light, I will write about it. But right now, the Zenshin gods are saying, you need to live the course of your life a little bit more. Keep practicing as the Zenshin. And then at some point, this will be shared as a method that we can teach others. But right now, I'm humbly just waiting and living my life in this moment and saying, okay, I'm the student of Zenching. So that's the Zenshin method. Yeah.
Great. We'll keep an eye on the evolution of the concept and how you are going to develop it over the next years. Masami, what a lovely discussion. We're approaching the end of the interview. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I actually kind of want to ask you questions. Because you're very intriguing too. And what, I guess, let me put it this way. So what intrigued you to contact me as a health intuitive, first of all? And then also, what gives you maybe the juice, maybe the inner strength that wells up inside you that makes you wake up every morning and say, I want to look for new voices and I want to, seek people out and to share this. I would love to hear that, because you said you're going to be writing your 3rd book. That means I haven't even gotten to the 1st book yet. So I admire your, basically resiliency to write books, because writing books is a lot of work. So I would love to know a little bit about you too.
Yeah, it's a long story. I mean, I used to write when I was young, then I moved to Canada, and that process and inspiration stopped. I got into the, day-to-day life and the job and all the responsibilities. And I also went through a very interesting event where I met a very well-known writer. And I asked him at what age did he start writing. He mentioned 45. And my first thought was, oh my God, so old. At that time, I was 27. So right after that, my inspiration was kind of gone. And it came back when I turned 45. It was quite a coincidence, which in fact, I don't call it a coincidence. It just meant to happen that way. And in terms of, and from there, I just try to express my experience, which I've accumulated in both countries, Romania, my country of origin, and Canada. At one point, I was, still on my spiritual journey, looking for ways to discover myself and connect with the divinity, with God. And writing was one of these ways. At the same time, I was looking for a guru, someone who can also give me the direction. And Spiritual Inspire podcast was another venue where I can not only express myself, but let others express themselves and teach my viewers on how they can step on their spiritual journey. Small things from their health to their improving their mind, their sharpness of mind, and meditation, breath work. And with you was the same. I was intrigued about, you're half Japanese. I had some previous guests which were half Japanese, and I wanted to find out your angle to health and how you overcome the MS situation. And again, in my opinion, was also energy, the negative energy which you captured into your body, plus the pressure you put on yourself. Because as you said, everything is energy around us, everything is vibration, and we have to be very careful on how we talk, we think. And yes, when I wake up in the morning, I really want to have a day when I can connect again with divinity, with God, with myself, find out new ways about who I really am, because I don't know who I really am at this point. I'm still figure it out. And my journey continues. In 5 days, we're switching countries again. We are moving to Panama, to a different climate, different culture, meeting new people. So moving to a new country in my second time in my lifetime. So might not be the last time, we'll see. But again, I take this life as an experience, and I really want to meet new people and let others know about my experiences and how I, not necessarily attack them, how I approach them, and I'm open to learn every single day. I learn from my children, I learn from their friends, from my wife, from every single person I meet, and I'm really open to learning and to new experiences.
Well said. Thank you so much. Exactly. And then you're straddling many places in the world, on the physiological level, and then on so many dimensions. And then as we move into, and we are already in very different dimensions now, 5D dimensions, and maybe even more beyond. And as we shift into this different realm of the universe and cosmic energies, it's so important that we don't lose sight of our own groundedness and our rootedness, because the deeper you can root yourself into who you are, the more ascension you get to experience, because the large trees have a large root system. Yes. And they go deep and wide. And so for me, when I work with my clients and work with people, is not to focus so much on the ascension side, but to bring them back to the physiological side and support them in rooting, because then the more you can root yourself into belonging in who you are, wherever you will be, whether it's Romania or Japan or Canada or Panama or anywhere you choose to be, the roots, nobody can uproot you literally. You will be rooted. And the more you can be grounded, the more you will be in touch with the heavenly energy, the cosmic energy. And that's when you get to experience the true flow. And that's when you get to experience true you. Yeah. So, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, many lovely support you will receive in your transition.
Thank you, Masami. And yes, I will love to meet you someday face to face. And I'm dreaming of summit where most of my guests will get together face to face. Some of them know each other. They participated in various events. And I will just stay in one corner and listen to all the wisdom they have to share. I just want to be the facilitator and do nothing else but listen and immerse myself into all this knowledge. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
And to my guests, thank you for watching the interview. Share it, like it. Support me on patreon.com/claudiumurgan. Download my first book, The Decadence of Our Souls, when you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.